You know, life in the 19th century wasn't all that pleasant, right? Let's take an example of the western parts of America, shall we? Living God knows how many miles from any big town or major settlement, probably on your own, trying to make some semblance of life, having to fend for yourself from harsh living conditions, from drought, hostile environment, and others in the same situation as yourself. The gold rush brought many revolutionary ideas with expansion towards the west coast. The expansion of railroad from east to west, the transcontinental railroad as it was coined, revolutionary mining techniques, hydraulics were the new big hit in the area of mining. This subsequently launched the US into the firm economic powerhouse. But it wasn't all good. With a sudden rush of gold, many opportunistic people saw their chance to get some easy money by exploiting the less fortunate, from the less harmful sellers of various elixirs, from hair growth to longevity, to the more violent ones like outlaws, bandits, and even highwaymen. Oh yeah, and let's not forget how the Californian government treated foreign miners, Chinese specifically, with ridiculous mining taxes and less than ideal treatment on the railroad expansion. Oh, and before we continue any further, if you don't mind, if you could subscribe and like the video, it helps me with the YouTube algorithm, you know, thanks. Anyway, one of these outlaws that's interesting for our story today is George Parrott, aka Big Parrott, aka Big Nose George, aka George Manus, aka George Warden. So let me get this straight. The guy had a huge nose, had a last name Parrott, was nicknamed Big Nose George. I think there's a joke here somewhere hidden in plain sight, you could say right under our noses. Now you might be thinking, knowing this channel, that we'll be discussing one of his greatest or weirdest heists, right? Robberies, whatever. No, not really, yeah. Because you see, for however despicable George was during his lifetime, his afterlife activities proved to be quite a bit more interesting. You'll see what I mean soon. His early life is of no importance to this story, so we'll just skip all over that. Right along. Now our friend here, Big Nose George, was in a group of outlaws, 7 in total in fact. And if you trust him on his words, the leaders of the said group were Frank and Jesse James. No evidence supports these claims, and it is generally accepted as one of his lies, since 2 of the band members were murdered prior to him and the rest have never been apprehended, so no one can confirm those claims. Anyway, George and his gang members had a relatively humble beginnings in the field of robbery and repossession of goods. Stealing from wandering strangers, stealing cattle, eventually moving to stagecoach robberies, and then finally moving to big leagues, the train robberies. In fact, one botched train robbery was what started their downfall. Somewhere in August in 1878, they had a grandiose idea of robbing a Pacific Union train. They had it all set up. Remove the train tracks to derail the train, hide in the bushes and wait for the train to crash. When the train crashes, jump on a wagon and move slowly to the vault. That's how it should have gone for George and his crew. But unfortunately for them, a section crew found out the removal of the train tracks and promptly reported it to the foreman, who then stopped the train, I guess. Now they had to flee. Not only did the robbery went in a fluke, but now they also have 2 lawmen on their tail. And the gang and the officers soon came head to head in the Rattlesnake Canyon. The end result was the death of both officers. being ambushed, one shot in the head and the other shot in the back while trying to flee from the gang. Now, having killed 2 lawmen, they were deemed sufficiently dangerous to warrant a $10,000 reward. Naturally, the gang had to disperse. Now, where all the other members went is not really that important. What is that 2 members were killed. One just 1 month after this, trying to rob a stagecoach, and the other by an angry mob. Being captured and transported to Roland City, the train was stopped by an angry mob, who then proceeded to decorate a telegraph pole with his body. Soon after that, our boy George was also apprehended, drunkenly boasting about killing 2 lawmen and robbing a merchant of his life savings. Promptly being apprehended, he was sent to Wyoming to stand trial for murder. Now, this was in late 1880s. So George had to wait till April to get his justice, a death by hanging, of course. Being a law-abiding citizen, he would stoically wait and accept his fate, he said sarcastically. Not wanting to get killed, George was planning to escape, and in March of 1881 he realized his plan, or at least tried to escape. He tried using a knife to loosen the rivets on the shackles that were binding his legs. Having no success in loosening them, he just saw through them. Now free from his shackles, he had to do with jailer Robert Rankin. He used those heavy shackles to strike the man over the head, nearly killing him in the process. Now, almost at the brink of escape, Rankin's wife Rosa grabbed the gun and forced George back into his cell. All the commotion inside the jailhouse couldn't get unnoticed by the local residents, and soon after a masked mob was formed and stormed the jail. They dragged George out, put noose around his neck, drove over the telegraph pole with the intention of hanging him right then and there. And soon after 3 attempts and both of his ears gone, George was finally dead. Okay, that's it, right? The end of the story. Goodbye. It's all over, right? Of course it fucking isn't. You can see the time we have left. Besides, this is too simple of an ending for me personally. You see, even on his Wikipedia page, they had a sense of humor when describing him. Famous for banditry, murder, and becoming a pair of shoes. It's true. Dr. John Eugene Osborne and Dr. Thomas McGee, as well as his assistant Lillian Heath, were the ones who got the body, since he had no relatives who could claim it. Now let's get into the bizarre shit. They cut open his skull to examine the brain to see if there is any difference between a law-abiding citizen and a criminal. That was all a normal practice at the time, of course, and something that McGee and his assistant were doing professionally. But Osborne, on the other hand, had a bunch of fucked up ideas. First of all, he made a death mask using plaster. The death mask had no ears, of course, since George left them at the telegraph pole. After that, he removed some skin from his chest and thighs and set them to a tannery with the specific instructions to make him a pair of shoes and a medicine bag, and also to definitely include his nipples. He got his shoes and he got his bag, but unfortunately for Osborne, man nipples were nowhere to be found. Apparently they didn't use them. Crestfallen, Osborne still proudly wore his shoes wherever he went. The rest of his body was kept in a whiskey barrel with salt solution, all the way until doctors stopped using his various parts for experiments. The disposal of the said barrel was done simply by burying it in a backyard of McGee's. It's not clear when, but somewhere down the timeline, the young assistant Lillian was given the top part of his skull, which was used as an ashtray and a doorstop. Osborne went on to become a prominent political figure as well as third governor of Wyoming. And Lillian Heath became the first female physician in Wyoming. So at least in that sense, George was useful for something good, right? It was all found in the 1950s when construction workers found a barrel with some bones, a pair of shoes, and a lower part of the skull. Soon Dr. Lillian Heath was contacted for a possible other part of the skull, which turned out to be a perfect fit. Also subsequently DNA tests confirmed what everyone already know, that this was in fact Big Nose George. Now in his death, George has done more good than he ever did or could do when he was alive. His remains, well, shoes made from him, bottom part of his skull, as well as his death mask, are on a permanent display in Carbon County Museum in Rawlins. The other part of his skull, as well as the shackles that bound him, are in a different museum, Union Pacific Museum in Nebraska. His .44 caliber Remington New Model Army is yet in another museum, a Sweetwater County Historical Museum. Unfortunately, his bag was never found. Someone, somewhere, right now, maybe even you, rocks that bag without even knowing it. Sheesh, George is truly all over the place. If you are going to take anything from this story, I guess you should take that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. So don't let such trivial things as living or dying stop you from achieving your ultimate potential. The opportunity is out there, you just need to go and grab it. Now if you'll excuse me, I gotta go and become a lingerie. Oh, but before I go, here's your second reminder to subscribe and like the video if you previously haven't. See ya!